right. Hello, Commissioner Oleon. Very nice to have you join us.
Thank you, Tiela. Good to see you.
I would love to start with you just talking a little bit about your background, where you went to college, where you went to law school, what led you to go to law school, that sort of thing.
Okay. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and I pronounce it Missouri because that's where I'm from. But I moved from there to California when I was 4 years old, so I really didn't have much experience in the Midwest. I grew up primarily in Los Angeles through high school, and then was something of a vagabond in college. I got a really nice scholarship from the local newspaper in Los Angeles, but they made a very big mistake. They sent me a check once a year, payable to me, so I could do whatever I wanted with it. So I started off my first year at a private university in the Midwest. I went to Washington University in St. Louis, and I realized two things. One was my check for my scholarship would go a whole lot farther in-state tuition in California than it would at a private school out of state. And also I was a little bit homesick. So there was no room at Berkeley. So I got sent to UC San Diego, which I actually enjoyed a lot. And I was there for about a year and a half. And by then there was an opening at Berkeley. And so I transferred into Berkeley as a senior and got my bachelor's in communications. And then for a few months, I had a few months off because I graduated mid-year, and I was actually the first male preschool teacher at the Oakland Piedmont Jewish Community Center. They had never had a guy nursery school teacher before. I was their first, and I loved it. It was great, fun job. But then fall rolled around, and I started law school at what we still lovingly refer to as Bold Hall, but now it's known as Berkeley Law, and did my 3 years there, which I enjoyed for the most part. Then after that, I had two main choices career-wise when I graduated from law school. I got an offer from a big government agency in Washington where I could write oil and gas regulations for the rest of my career, which sounded really fascinating. Or I could work for a solo practitioner in Hayward, California, and sort of learn the ropes. And I chose that and worked in a small office for a couple of years. Got, I think, probably about as much education and mentoring out of that as I was going to. And so I struck out on my own only about 2 years out of law school, which I was able to do because my wife, then same wife now, by the way, she was a school teacher. So she had a little salary coming in. When I say a little salary, I think she's reminded me it's $9,000 a year as a full-time public school teacher. But that was enough to pay the rent. And it took me a couple of years before I started making money as a solo practitioner, but eventually I did. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Wow, that is quite a career. And when you were working at the firm, were you doing family law or mostly civil or?
The attorney whose practice it was, who shall remain nameless, not because he has to, was a very nice man. He's passed away many years ago now. He was the old-time general practice solo practitioner. He basically did anything that walked in the door. We used to say he would take any client as long as Mr. Green came with him to the initial interview. If he could collect a retainer, he would take the case. So I did virtually everything in the civil field. I really didn't do any criminal work, but I did family law, I did probate, I did estate planning, I did personal injury, did some business related stuff, pretty much everything civil and under the sun. When I opened my own practice, I started off pretty much as a generalist even at that point, but over the years narrowed my practice. And by the time I was done practicing and became a commissioner, I was doing primarily family law, estate planning, and probate litigation.
And is that because those are the things that you most enjoyed?
That was a lot of it. Part of it is just you end up falling into things, and that was what I was doing. And so that's what people came to me for. So that's what I kept doing. But there was an affirmative choice as well. Those are areas where the client contact is intense and intimate. In family law and in estate planning, you get to know every detail about your client's life. You get to know all about them and what makes them tick and what's important to them. And as you know, because you and I have known each other for a while now, I am a people person. I love chatting. I love meeting people. I love learning about them. And, that was a way that I was really able to do that. And in a helpful way, working them through difficult times in their life. So yes, I did enjoy it, but it was to some extent accidental that I sort of ended up moving in that direction.
Now, I do hear people who are in family law speak about the burnout of feeling that their clients' lives have so many stressors in them, and they bring all those stressors to you as their lawyer. Did you feel that way, and how did you deal with that issue?
I did not, for the most part, feel that way. And I have an expression that anybody listening to this who knows me well has probably heard me say this at some point or another. But I always said that practicing family law, or frankly, acting as a family law judge, was really not very stressful for me. It was stressful for the clients because at the end of the day, they had to go home to their dysfunctional family and all of the problems in their marriage and all of the custody issues with their kids and all those things that made their lives very difficult. I got to go home to my wonderful wife, my wonderful children, my beautiful house. It wasn't stressful for me. For me, it was the job, and I took it very seriously. But when it was time to leave, I went home to my very, very nice life. So it wasn't so stressful.
Right. It really sounds like you had great boundaries that you were able to set in your own mind.
I tried to. I'm not sure that my wife would have agreed with me when I would, take, in the old days when you had big, thick paper files, I would take a whole box full of paper files with me on vacation and be, sitting on a beach somewhere. She'd be working on her tan and I'd be slogging through some custody evaluation report or something. But yeah, I think I actually was able to achieve a pretty good work-life balance most of the time.
So what led you to become a commissioner?
It was always, I guess, in the back of my mind that doing some kind of judging work would be of interest to me. But I never really much acted on it until I suppose I did reach a point. I wouldn't call it burnout because I still enjoyed what I was doing, but it was kind of feeling like Groundhog Day a bit, that even though I enjoyed the working with the clients and all of that, the issues that I was dealing with were, they began to repeat themselves quite a bit. And I got a bit tired of the grind of running a small business, which is really what I never signed up for, but it's what you get when you're a solo practitioner, like it or not. So I began to think about, well, is there a way that I could use what I've learned, but in a somewhat different way that's going to be challenging and interesting and socially beneficial and all of that. So I decided that, yes, becoming a judicial officer seemed to, I think, meet my skill set. I learned that because I did a lot of pro temping. So I sort of did my due diligence. And I worked in small claims. I worked in juvenile court. I worked a lot in family law. I worked quite a bit in probate. So I got a lot of range of experience of being essentially a part-time judge, and realized, that I really did enjoy it and felt that I was pretty good at it. So I decided, yeah, let me give that a try. But I really didn't like the idea of the judicial selection process. I certainly wasn't going to run for election. That's a lot of money and a lot of heartache, and that clearly never appealed to me. And the applying through the governor route, I thought you needed connections, and I thought you needed to be a big donor to the governor's political party and all of that. Turns out that's not necessarily true, and even less true now probably than it used to be. But still, I felt that. And of course, the odds are long and against you because there's so many people who want the job and so few who actually get it. And the application, it's probably longer now. It was it was, I think, over 50 pages then. And it just didn't look like much fun to have to drag out all my old files to remember all the cases that I had handled 20 years before. So I decided to try the commissioner route. The application was much easier. I'd be going through the process with judges with whom I was to a fair extent familiar, so it was a more comfortable situation. And I didn't get it the first time. I don't know if they still do this, but they kept generally for a year at a time, they would keep a priority list. And if you knew somebody who knew somebody, you could find out where you were on the priority list. And I got pretty close to the top, but not quite there. And either my second or third go round, I got the phone call from the presiding judge, and I was ecstatic.
And when you became a commissioner, were you pretty much essentially assigned to family law for the duration, or?
Not quite. I would say I got moved into family law full time after about 6 months. But my first 6 months were incredibly great experience. It was in Hayward, the Hayward Hall of Justice. I was down on the first floor, and I had an assignment where I had a different type of case every single day of the week. So I did 1 day of juvenile delinquency, 1 day of juvenile dependency, 1 day of unlawful detainer, 1 day of small claims, and the other day might have been in something to do with family law. And it was incredible training. And for somebody with a short attention span, it was perfect. I was doing something different every day. I never got bored. I never got tired of it. I was always learning. I was always dealing with new people. It was really fabulous. Some of those areas I knew something about. Some of them were brand new to me, like the unlawful detainer. That was something I knew nothing about. I really enjoyed it. But to be honest, I can't remember exactly how it came about. But after about 6 months, I forget if I was offered or I was told. I think in those days I was probably told that I would be assigned to a family law department, and ended up, really for the next 8 years, pretty solidly, I was doing family law all day, every day, and really never once regretted it. It was always a dream assignment for me.
That's so, I think I can imagine people feeling so stressed out by that. 1 day in delinquency and 1 day in dependency and 1 day in UDs, and sort of similarly, people who are solos, I think we don't have as many solos who do what you're describing now, where sort of what we used to call a door law, whatever walks in the, people, I think today might find that really stressful, the notion of having to get up to speed on all those different areas of law.
Yeah, the judicial officers now, and this goes, I think, both for commissioners and judges as well, almost all of them have basically one subject matter assignment at a time. They may from year to year move into different areas, but the idea of having a split assignment, it's extremely rare. There's a couple, I think the mental health court, for example, I think is a part-time assignment. So the judge who's there also does something else part of the week. But for the most part, you're doing one thing on a full-time basis. And, that's great from a standpoint of developing expertise and being able to keep your cases chronologically over longer periods of time and such. But, especially for somebody just starting out as a judicial officer, it was fabulous experience to have that kind of variety.
And what was your experience as a judicial officer? How did it compare did it meet your expectations as compared to practicing law? And what did you like or dislike about it?
It really did. It was a good fit pretty much from the beginning. Part of what I learned from being a pro tem was that I was able to make decisions and to feel comfortable about doing that and then move on. I tell a story sometimes about an office mate that I had, very good attorney, really nice guy. He's still around in the community. And one time he pro tem'd in small claims. And about 6 months later, I asked him, I said, so, how'd you like it when you were pro temping in small claims? He said, oh, it was horrible. I said, what's the matter? He said, well, I still have all of my cases under submission. And this was 6 months later. As easy as I found it to decide cases, he found it that difficult. He was just agonizing over it. He was taking it so seriously. God love him. That's great. But, it's not for everybody. You have to be able to make the decision and then move on from it and not second guess yourself, because that's not going to do you any good. And just, take it seriously and do the best you can with it, and then move on to the next case. So that part was very comfortable for me. Having been a solo, and I was a really small solo. I mean, I often didn't even have office mates, and at most I had one employee and such. So being at the court, I was around people all the time, and I loved that. Developed really warm relationships with all of my clerks. I had not all that many over the years because we stuck together pretty well, but great relationships with the clerks, with the court reporters, with the other judges and commissioners who I worked closely with. So that really was all wonderful, and I really did enjoy all of that. It was nice to have a paycheck. It was really nice to have health benefits and a retirement plan and all that good stuff that when working for myself I really never had those, or if I did, it was paid for out of my own pocket. So all of that was great, and even I'd say the one thing that was a difficult adjustment was being part of a bureaucracy and having a boss. I'd really never had a boss before, and now I had a supervising judge in my department, and then I had a presiding judge over the court, and we had a court executive officer, and all of them, were above me and could tell me what to do. And that took a little getting used to. I don't think I chafed at it too badly, and I had a lot of nice people that I was working with, but that was definitely an adjustment. I will say that back in the olden days, and I became a commissioner in 2003. Back in those olden days, there was almost no differentiation between commissioners and judges. We were very collegial. Almost never did somebody sort of pull status or pull rank on you. It was a very, very positive relationship with almost all of the judges. And that changed a little bit as the years went by. I felt a little more like a commissioner and a little less like a judicial officer. As the years went by. And, it could be a lot of reasons for that. Could have just been the people involved. It could have been the budget pressures that the court was under, which became extreme. And I certainly sympathize with the difficulties that the judges had to deal with that. But it was a little less comfortable, I would say. Not a lot, but a little less comfortable as the years went by. The official term for a commissioner is a subordinate judicial officer. I'm called an SJO. And I felt a little more subordinate as the years went by.
A little less J, a little more S and a little less J.
Exactly right. Which isn't to say it was a bad gig. I still absolutely enjoyed it, but it did change a little bit. And then I'm sure we will get to the big change that led to my eventual career change. But
yes, so
I don't know if we're ready for that yet or not.
We are. I was just about to get to that. So
okay. So I did a half a year at this potpourri assignment, and then 8 years or so in full-time family law. And then, as I like to say, the court, in its infinite wisdom, decided that I could best serve the citizens of Alameda County by becoming a full-time traffic court commissioner. And that was okay. But they also informed me that I'd become a full-time traffic court commissioner in Fremont. Now, Fremont is a lovely community. Some of my good friends and some lawyers I adore are in Fremont. It's a great town with great people, but it's a long way from where I live. So it meant that I was going to be living with a pretty serious commute and doing nothing but traffic court all day, every day. And though traffic court is a very important area of the law, it's the opposite of, say, my first assignment where I had something different every day. In traffic court, you have pretty much the same thing every day. It's important, and you're dealing with different people in front of you in terms of the litigants, but it definitely has a certain repeat factor to it. And so for those reasons, I decided that, maybe there would be some kind of a move that I could make where I would be more comfortable, or at least, or perhaps more challenged. So I started looking around a little bit, and I realized that there was a world out there for private judges and mediators and such, in which family law was a useful specialty to have and a useful background. And I felt, having done that for 8 or more years, plus my time in practice, that I had if not a following, at least I was known within the family law community, and there was a chance that that I might be considered positively enough to get some gigs here and there.
Right.
So I started looking around and realized that you could either try and do it on your own as a solo, or you could try and join some organization. And after a little bit of looking, I became enraptured with an outfit called ADR Services, and did a lot of due diligence on them, and was told that they were lovely people to work with and had a pretty successful business model and such, and that maybe I should consider whether I would fit with them and they would fit with me. Weird coincidences, right? I was just about to pick up the phone to call the boss at ADR Services, and the phone rang. It was the boss at ADR Services. She said, "Hi, you don't know me, but we've had our eye on you for a while now. And if you were ever thinking about making a change, we would love to talk to you about a career in the private sector."
Wow, that must have been a sign from above or something.
It was indeed, and it was wonderful. So, long story short, had a few meetings with them. Decided yes, indeed, on both sides that it was going to be a good fit, and so at that point, frankly, I gave the court notice. I often say that I worked for the Alameda County Superior Court for 10 years and 1 day. It was just long enough to vest in the pension and vest in the healthcare benefits and all that. Actually, I think it was 10 years and 13 days because I had to work until the end of the pay period, but close enough. And then made the transition. And one of my mentors there was a leading light of the Alameda County Bar Association back in the day, Judge Bonnie Sabra.
Mhm.
And Judge Sabra gave me a lot of advice and a lot of good wisdom about moving into the private sector as a neutral in general, and ADR Services in particular. She was great help to me. And among the many pieces of good advice she gave me is, no matter what a hotshot you think you are, no matter how popular you think you are, you will not make a fortune right off the bat. It'll take you 2 or 3 years until you really establish yourself. And I would say she was just about spot on. There was business from the very beginning, and that was great. But I would say after about 2 years, I really felt that I was well established and plenty busy enough by the standards that I wanted to keep. So that was a lot of good advice from Judge Sabra. That was one of them.
And so how is it different? I mean, there are so many ways, but how is it different being, do you mostly do mediation, or do you ever do private judging?
No, it's there's a theme in my life. One of the things in my life is I never just do one thing, right?
Yeah.
No, it is something of a mixture. My oversimplification is I say that I do about 50% mediation and 50% private judging. In fact, that's probably not exactly true anymore, though that might have been true once. I would say the majority of my assignments are private judging assignments, which means that I am a full service temporary judge of the Alameda County Superior Court, or the Contra Costa Superior Court, or the San Francisco Superior Court. I work throughout the Bay Area. And by stipulation of the parties, and then by order of the presiding judge, I am assigned as temporary judge to hear a particular case for all purposes. And I have to take the oath of a Superior Court judge, and I am acting as the Superior Court judge for that particular case. So that's probably more than half of what I do. I do a fair number of straight mediations, almost exclusively in the family law field, though occasionally I'll get one in a different field. Occasionally those turn into judging assignments. Handle a mediation, maybe don't settle the entire case, but the parties and the attorneys feel like you've done a good job, and you're an honest broker, and you know what you're talking about. So they need a judge, so they decide they might want to use me rather than going back to the public court. That happens occasionally. And then the other things that I do a fair bit of what's called parenting coordination, which is essentially, it's a special master kind of gig, but only in the custody field. And some people who do that are lawyers or judges. Some people who do that are mental health professionals. Either profession qualifies you. And the job is actually, it's kind of a mixture of either deciding certain custody related issues for the parties, and then the other part is making recommendations to the judge on family law issues. And you do some of both in any given case. depending on what the issues are. So I do a fair bit of that. And then occasionally I get some assignments as discovery referee, which is, to be honest, it's a little burdensome primarily because the discovery judges in the court have a big staff that get to read all of these mind-numbingly exciting discovery documents. I don't have that kind of a staff, so I get to read them myself. So it's a time-consuming job. I don't mind doing it, but it is time-consuming. And so that's really what I do professionally most of the time. And I work just about as much as I want to. It's not quite full time because there's other things I like to do with my life, which I'm happy to talk about. But for the time that I want to spend working, I keep quite busy and really enjoy it.
So I do want to hear about the other things that you like to do with your life when you're not settling family law disputes or judging them.
Yep, sure. I would say the two that are absolutely top of the list at this point, and it's hard to pick an order of priority because they're both so wonderful. One is travel. My wife and I have always been pretty good travelers, but now we've got friends who say, I don't know anybody who travels as much as the two of you. Well, I know people who travel more than we do, but we do travel quite a bit, and various kinds of travel. We do some, sort of sun, sand, and surf kind of holidays just to relax and decompress. We go to Hawaii with some regularity. We go to Mexico with some regularity. Really enjoy that. We do some cruises. We're not like cruise fanatics, but we've done quite a few cruises and enjoy that as kind of a change of pace. It's another nice way of traveling. And then, we actually do have a timeshare. We're one of those timeshare companies where you get points and so you can go to different places. And we do that sometimes, some of those beach vacations or other things like Sedona we've been to a couple of times, for example, and really enjoyed that. And then, we'll do some more traditional, grand tour of Europe, go to see big cities and or see 12 cities in 12 days or whatever.
Today's Tuesday, this must be Paris, right?
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So it's a variety of different kinds of travel, but that's a passion. And, as so many people have experienced, the last year was pretty much a black hole when it came to travel. Not quite completely, but what we did was pretty boring and pretty nearby, frankly. And now that we've had our vaccinations, both of them,
We've temporarily lost the commissioner.
wear our masks. We're gonna try and distance. I mean,
Wait, I'm so sorry. We lost you for just a moment there. So we lost you at now that we have our vaccines.
And now that we have our vaccines, we will certainly be doing a lot more travel, but we will still be careful. We'll wear our masks. We will try and socially distance. We will do things outdoors rather than indoors as much as possible. But nevertheless, we're now in a position to sort of start catching up a little bit on that lost year. So that's one of the two things. And the other, I don't have a picture right handy, but I have two granddaughters, ages 5 and 3, who live on the peninsula. So we're able to see them with great regularity. And in fact, I try not to work on Fridays because Friday is babysitting day. I'll work on Fridays if I have to, but usually I don't have to. And my wife and I will go down and we'll take care of the girls near their home on the peninsula for the day. And then we bring them back to our home every week for dinner and sleepover and breakfast the next morning. So we get about 24 hours with them pretty much every week. And it's just heaven.
Oh, I bet. What a treat. And what a pleasure that you're able to be close enough to them to do that.
It really is. I think that grandparenting is probably the only job that I've ever heard of that every single person who has that on their resume loves doing it. Even the people I know, like the men that I know who were, sort of conventional, gender stereotyped, go to the office and don't do much caring for the kids when they have their own kids, are gaga over their grandchildren. So that's great. So there's those things are certainly the two most fun and important and all that. I do play golf with some regularity, usually pretty badly, but I still try and take it seriously and enjoy it. I play some games with family and with friends, cards and board games and things like that from time to time. I'm occasionally a trivia buff, as you and I have talked about a little bit, but usually I save that for the cruises where trivia is a blood sport.
Oh, I had no idea.
Oh yeah. If you ever decide to cruise, Tiela, be sure to pick your cruise line based on how serious they are about trivia. It can be a life and death matter on some cruise ships.
I see.
But it's
Okay.
actually, but it's fun. It's fun. And I have 3 grown children in addition to the grandchildren. 2 are local, and unfortunately, I see them pretty regularly. And one lives in Chicago. He is a puppeteer, which is kind of fun. A very adult puppeteer, by the way. He does not do kids' birthday parties.
I see. Your Avenue Q kind of puppeteer.
Yeah, or even a little edgier than that.
Got it.
He does some pretty dark stuff, but it's fascinating. He's a very talented guy. So family is important as well, very much so. And something new I'm doing this year, I'm actually in a book group for the first time. It's a men's book group, and I really enjoy the discipline of having to read at least one novel or nonfiction book every month, and then talk about it. So,
And is there a theme to the books that you read?
No, the name of the group, which I joined after it had already been in existence for 20 years or so, I'm the new kid on the block. I'm also, I think, the youngest, which may tell you something about this group. But it's called the Groundhog Book Club. And the main reason for the name, there may be others, is that they were founded on Groundhog Day about 20 years ago. And there's no theme. The host for the month, and there's 11 members, and so basically everybody gets a month a year. The host puts out 3 nominations, and the group votes, and plurality rules. Whichever one of the 3 books gets the most votes, that's what you read. And I'd say it's been a fairly equal mix of fiction and nonfiction. Last month was my month, and we read the book Cast, which I highly recommend.
Yes, we read that at the ACBA book club as well.
Yeah. So that was good. Anyway, so that's something new that I'm doing this year. And I do a fair bit of cooking. I hope my wife isn't listening to this. I'm not going to say I'm a better cook, but I enjoy cooking more than she does. So I tend to do not all, but the majority of the cooking for our family, or when we do dates and such with other people. So there you go. That's kind of my life.
So as we wrap up, I want to just ask you for some advice. And I want to break it into 2 groups. I think there's the family law folks who would love to hear your advice generally for family law attorneys. And then there's the newer attorneys who, whatever field they're going into could really use some help in figuring that out along with everything else.
Okay. Let me take them in reverse order, because a lot of the things that I would say to family law attorneys would also apply to any relatively new attorney. So some things for new attorneys in general. Among my many philosophies of life, one that I kind of honed mostly as a father, more even than as a lawyer, was to make the choices in life that narrow your future choices as little as possible. In other words, keep your avenues open. So to an attorney starting out, I would suggest, and this would even start in law school, but would continue on into practicing law, try and be exposed to as many different areas as possible early in your career. Try not to hyper specialize too much too early, because you really never know what's going to be especially appealing to you, what you're going to be especially good at. And if you get yourself in a situation where you are very specialized right off the bat, maybe that'll work for you. And if it does, that's fabulous, good for you. But if it doesn't, you run the risk of either suffering burnout and leaving the career entirely, or feeling bitter about it, or just not having the kind of job satisfaction that you would be more likely to have if you had made but be exposed to as much variety as possible. Expose yourself to as many other attorneys as possible. You know, even if it's not somebody who's a formal mentor to you, at least you know, talk to other lawyers as you go on, if you really dip your toe in the water before you jump in.
Okay, so that's good advice for new attorneys. What about for family law attorneys, do you think?
A lot of what I would say, and this would work for new attorneys as well, is know your audience. When you're working in a specialized area, and family law is kind of a generalized, specialized area. You know, we think of family law as being a field unto itself, but one of the interesting things for somebody like me is that in family law, you have to know every other area of the law, at least to some extent. You have to know some criminal and some bankruptcy and some tax and some real estate and some business and everything else you can think of. It isn't just sort of one field. But you know, when you're practicing it in the field, I think there's a tendency to assume that everybody knows what you know. And that's not necessarily true. So for instance, if you have a case in front of a judge, if it's a very experienced judge that you've appeared in front of before, or you know they've been around the block many times, you know, you don't have to start with the basics. You don't have to teach them black letter law. They already know those things, and you can jump to the chase and not bore them or waste their time with things that aren't crucial. On the other hand, if you're dealing with a judge who is relatively new to the field, or if you have, even with a more experienced judge, some kind of a unique problem, some unusual fact pattern, or some legal issue that doesn't come up all the time, don't be afraid to educate your judicial officer and to make sure that they understand what they need to know in order to deal with your case intelligently. So that's part of it, and that's true. You know, when you're writing briefs, when you're speaking in court, consider your audience and gear your presentation accordingly. I think is something that's important. The importance of burnishing and protecting your reputation really can't be overstated. Once again, in particular, if you're practicing within a relatively small subject area where you're going to see the same lawyers and the same judges over and over again, it's important. Even if you're not swimming in a small pool, it still is very, very important. You make, you know, one mistake, you do one thing wrong, you behave in an unethical or inappropriate or unprofessional manner, even one time, and people are going to remember that. On the other hand, if you are respectful of opposing counsel, opposing parties, the court staff, that's really important. You know, that becomes known. If your word is trustworthy, if a judge knows, or if opposing counsel knows that they can rely on you to be honest, not to play games, sometimes to even, you know, let them know when perhaps, you know, your case isn't the strongest. You know, you'll make the arguments that you need to make to represent your client, but you know, if you're making an argument that is not the strongest argument that you might have, you know, the fact that the opposing counsel and the judge are aware of that, you know, I think that actually enhances your credibility on that case and the next time around. So I think that's really important. There's another piece of advice that I don't always even follow myself, even now, but that is never take on a case that you don't still want to have 10 years from now. Family law cases go on for a long time. They can go on for 10 years with modifications and reviews and things like that. But even if they don't, it's a good way to choose the clients and the cases that you're going to be comfortable with. If you get bad vibes from a client at the first meeting, you know, it's tempting to say, oh yeah, they can pay me the retainer. Oh yeah, I've got the expertise to handle it. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. But if you're picking up bad vibes, if this just doesn't feel like it's going to be a good fit, you don't trust the person completely, or you just have a communication style that just isn't meshing well, I think you're better off saying thanks, but no thanks. Do it politely and such, but you're better off not. I sometimes refer to the files that sit on the shelf and bark at you. They're dogs of cases. You want to have nothing to do with them, and yet there they are, and you're a professional. Of course, you have to do your best to handle the case properly, but it kind of always goes down to the bottom of the stack when you're making your priorities, and you always kind of groan and roll your eyes when you have to open the file or meet with the client or whatever. Suss that out in advance, and if you've got some bad vibes about it, if it doesn't feel like it's going to be a comfortable matter for you to live with and a comfortable client for you to live with, maybe you're better off saying no.
That is excellent advice.
Thanks.
Excellent advice.
I don't always take it, by the way.
Believe me, that's exactly the kind of advice that we give to others, and then we watch ourselves as we sometimes don't follow it. But well, Commissioner, I really want to thank you so much for spending the time with us. It's been really fun, and I didn't give you as much of a chance to tell jokes as maybe I should have, but we'll have that another time.
That's okay.
Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. I really enjoyed it. One thing I didn't mention, let me give you a plug for the Alameda County Bar Association. It's an organization with which I have been involved my entire professional career. I was never president, but I was on the board for many years. I served as section chair of a couple of different sections over the years and such. Always found it to be a fabulous organization to belong to. Really good people, both at the staff level. I walk into an ACBA meeting when you used to be able to walk into a meeting or an in-person MCLA or whatever, and just the warm greeting and the friendship and the camaraderie with the staff and with the other members of the association and the other leaders of the association when I did that. It's always, frankly, been one of the joys of my professional life. It really has been. Great organization, and it's been great for my business development as well. Back when I was really starving and living on my wife's $9,000 a year, the fact that I was able to get an occasional court appointment or an occasional client to come in for what in those days was a free consultation, but at least I got to meet some clients that way. That helped to get my practice started. So it's been a wonderful organization for me. Still is. I still come to every event that I can get to, whether it's on Zoom or in person. And those of you out there, you family law attorneys and you starting attorneys, great organization, be active in it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
And is the check in the mail?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, the check. Oh, and here I thought I hadn't given you a chance to make a joke. Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Take care. It's always a pleasure.